Hi, welcome to Arise.Works, and this is our workshop on getting started with rendering and shading in Mentor and Houdini, and this is chapter 9. We are getting into the surface imperfections. We generate render time masks for occlusion, for dirt, and we use that information to develop our hard surface shader of the weapon. We will learn how to use dirt mask, how to use occlusion mask, and how to control it using the triplanar projection. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's talk about render time, dirt mask, and occlusion mask. As you can see in this setup, again, I have the geometry from the previous video because, I don't know, I made it, so why not use it, right? A camera that is really zoomed in to the focal length of 300, so kind of get this almost orthographic view. And I'm gonna add an environment light, just like in the previous video. And we go and do this skylit garage. And again, if we change the lighting scenarios, the little bug of shader disappearing will fix itself. And as we have learned previously for our dark metal, the light intensity could be much higher, like 2. Now we go to the material, drop down a principal shader. Whoops. Principal shader, I drag and drop it onto our geometry. I make it metallic, I make it slightly darker. You know, business as usual. And if we now render, it will be, well, obviously a metal kind of looking gun. I will just go and make our bumps to normal 0.03 as we learned in the previous video. This works well for our geo. And indeed, we have our gun being rendered and looking just fine. Almost like it's has just been machined, created, and what have you. Now I just have hold down Shift, left mouse, drag to isolate this particular place to viewport part to render, and finally we go into we press Tab, start typing OCCL, and as we can see there is the occlusion. And again I hit Tab and start writing the word dirt as in T-I-R-T, and there is the dirt mask. Now, as we know already, we can drag and drop our mask generators on our geometry, and the mask will be showcased in our viewport render preview. Now, if you are coming from another video or just don't know what's happening, remember, it does not affect the scene view. Everything that is getting generated at render time only appears in the render view, as the name suggests. Okay, let's start talking about the occlusion. So we have the bias, we have the ray distance, and we have a number of samples. Now, first of all, number of samples 256 is for our testing purposes, it's too much. Let's say 32 will be fine. Sure, it will be slightly more noisy, but we're not talking about the noise right now as we speak. Now, then there is the maximum ray distance. So -1 essentially suggests that the ray distance is kind of like infinite. So as you will see now, if I start dragging it from the left to right, it becomes first gray, then something starts appearing. These occluded parts start appearing, right? And I increase it more. This part being kind of like dropping the shadow, which is, again, we don't have any light in this scenario. This is only a generator that assumes that this part of our weapon, allegedly, it's a flashlight, it's occluding with its shadow the part of the main body of the stock of the rifle. It's actually SMG, but that's not the point. Anyway, if I make it 1, and if I convert it to -1, as you can see, nothing is happening. So basically, -1 is kind of like, it could be 100, could be million, it could be whatever, but it's -1 just for simplifying the numerics, I guess. Now, the bias is controlling overall look of our contrast in the generator. So if I increase the bias, let's say 1147, as we can see, it starts to be really sharp. 0.1, again, really sharp. 0.03, it becomes softer. So yeah, as you can see, tweaking this parameter gets us varying results. The less the bias, the less sharp the mask becomes. Okay, this is the basics of occlusion. We will get back to it. I promise it will become looking better. It will look better. Now, I dropped the dirt mask. The dirt mask is sort of like combines the fake bevel generators, the shader mask, and it also takes into account the planes that do not have the angle difference. So let me see, let me show you. If we increase the maximum distance, as you can see, this plane does not have, so let's see on our actual geometry. It does not have any varying angles. So the dirt mask accumulates in these places better than in the changing of the angle places. So for example, let's look at this part a bit closer. Essentially, this angle would not have any dirt in it, because if we are using extensively our flashlight, dirt will be only on the inside, where it's harder to clean up the dirt. It will not clean up itself. And here as well, it can accumulate, but on the edge, it will not. Whoops, I accidentally pressed the null. And as you can see, yep, there we go. Now, bias direction, what does it mean? Bias direction is the direction, in our case, we are looking at the hemisphere, which is kind of like the environment light setup. Imagine a hemisphere being around and projecting the rays, and the generator assumes that from now rays are being cast from the hemisphere. If I change it to fan, it will assume a different way. It's sort of like a plane that starts firing up those rays. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense if I explain it like that. So basically, it's just a different generator. It generates a different effect. Okay, usually hemisphere works just fine. Now, next up, maximum distance. As we can see, if we tweak the maximum distance, these planes become very, very white and very masked out. Everything else is not so much masked out. Okay, now I'll first reduce the maximum distance to have a slightly better representation of what I'm going to show you next. The bias direction currently goes in X, Y, Z. It's a negative Y. It goes from top to bottom, or bottom to top. It's not actually, obviously, it's not super obvious where it does go, but you can just remove the -1, make it 1 to see what suits you better. Okay, the bias actually will shift our mask to top or to bottom. Okay, if I make the bias -5, as you can see, this, let's call it this untouched mask, the black part of the mask, went a bit higher. Okay, I press the snap. If I make the bias +5, as we can see, there you go. It started looking downwards. The untouched mask, the clear part of the mask, is looking downwards. Here is looking upwards, here is looking downwards. So basically, imagine a rain pouring down this gun, like a toxic rain that is white, right? Here it will be like as if it pours from top to bottom, and here from bottom to top. Hopefully this makes sense. Anyway, the point is, I'm sorry, the point is, the bias controls how the mask generator shifts the mask upwards or downwards, depending on your direction. Of course, if you if your direction is coming from the x-axis, for example, if we make here 1 and press down here 0, as you will see, it will shift in different directions. It now shifts from left to right. And z-axis will shift it from front to bottom. Usually y is working fine. You can press -1, you can type +1. It doesn't really matter because you can shift the results in the bias. Okay, the scope represents which geometry is taken into account. And since we will work with all of the geometry, the scope, we don't need to touch it, but what we could do is drag and drop our geometry parts into the scope. As I have previously mentioned, we could divide our network view into number of different columns and drag and drop into the scope and isolate the objects that will be taken into account. The same goes for occlusion. As you can see, the object scope, again, you can select which objects do we need to occlude. Basically, if we have, let's say, if we have this weapon lying on the floor, we can exclude the floor from our occlusion computation. Okay, let's get back to our occlusion. Now, as you might already imagined, we will now control the generation of the occlusion using different methods. In this case, I will not use noise because what I want to do is actually create a dirt and imperfections on our weapon. And for this, I will not use the noise, but I will actually use triplanar projection. So what we're going to do, we're going to control the bias. Sorry, by the way, if we make the bias close to 1 and if we go into the negative, as you can see, it actually generates really interesting results. So negative bias is a thing. Now, I'm gonna press down the tab, start writing triplanar projection. And if you don't know how the triplanar projection defaultly set up in my setup, what are my defaults in my triplanar projection? Basically, start with a scale of 3. Everything is being copied from the x-axis, as you can see. If you are not aware and not sure what's going on, just visit the video on the triplanar projection. I explain everything, how we set up the triplanar projection, so it's fast and it's tweakable and, you know, approachable. So I go to the Houdini pick texture and I select the concrete texture, black and white one, and I put that into our triplanar project. And if I now get the color into the bias, or maybe maximum distance, let's start with the bias. Okay, something is definitely happening. Now, as we have already seen, basically our triplanar projection generates the mask that is going from 0 to 1 per pixel of our render time. And occlusion, that is 1, is getting this really sharp occlusion. And something that is close to 0 getting a soft treatment. Now, this is not exactly what I want, so first of all, I will divide the 0 to 1 information for our bias using the, again, hitting the tab. I start writing divide. Basically, you can divide by a constant. I'm writing down constant, and you can pipe the constant here, but, you know, it's taking a little bit more time than I want, so we just divide by constant. It's the second node. Again, I'll just repeat, tab, divide, and here I select divide constant. So what is going to happen is the signature is RGB color, which is the vector information basically, and the divider is 1. So if we divide it, let's say by 10, we can see that we have a better result. And if we divide it by -10, we start seeing interesting results. Let's say we divide it by -100. Nope, that's too much. -1. Yep, this is exactly what I was going for. This looks beautiful, in my opinion, of course. Now, I increase the scale, let's say, I don't know, 6, because basically the texture is a bit low quality, but, you know, it goes with the initial setup of the Houdini, so who am I to judge, right? It's free, it's there, up for the taking. Anyway, as we can see, we have some result already of our occlusion mask. We will get to ramping it a bit later. Now I'm going to just talk about the dirt mask. And with dirt mask, we'll do something something similar. So in this case, we will control the maximum distance because apparently this thing controls how the dirt mask looks. Okay, I'll get the, no, actually, let the bias be negative. So holding down the Alt key and left drag and drop. Let's see what we got if we divide the result of our triplanar by 5 and getting it into maximum distance. Let's see what we got. All right, actually, superb result out of the gate. Let's just wait, maybe 550. I'll accidentally rolled too much. Let's say 50. Okay, 50 gives us kind of what we need. Again, this is the dirt mask. We can tweak the bias, so some of the dirt we go. Now, actually, this is better because this now sort of like pours the dirt from top to bottom, and these parts on the lower end of our flashlight is getting sort of like cleaned up by a rain, and this part is being in the dust. It is not being cleaned up by the rain. So essentially, I like it better. Hopefully this makes sense, right? So if I do not divide and get into the maximum distance, it will just be from 0 to 1. It's just too much. So we divide anything that comes from the triplanar, from 0 to 1, we divide it by 50. And essentially, we are getting results from 0 to 0.02. And this is a much better result for our maximum distance in the dirt mask. And you're like, okay, fine, dirt mask, occlusion mask, beautiful. What are we going to do with it? How does it help us to create our shader? Great question. I'm glad you asked, you know, talking to yourself. So I drag and drop the principal shader, and I think we will start with the occlusion, and I start with typing, hitting tab, typing the ramp, going to ramp parameter, piping the occlusion into input, making the ramp parameter called name ramp1, and we connect ramp1, let's say, to our roughness. Something is weird. Let's see. This should be 0. This should be 1. As you can see, it was like a perfect mirror, which is really weird. Anyway, I think we fixed that. And I suppose we can get from, not from 0, because this looks really weird, from 0.3, sort of like kind of machined metal, to 1. Again, I remapped this occlusion, so everywhere that was 0 became 0.3 roughness, and everything that was 1, which is almost nowhere, became 1. So I drag and drop principal shader back, and as we can see, we indeed start to have differences in roughness of the material. Now, roughness, to my opinion, isn't enough. So what I'm going to do is wherever roughness is higher, which is on the right of our ramp, we will have, let's say first of all, we'll start with a darker version of the metal. So again, essentially, I mean, in the first place, our base color was 0.1. So in the not rough section, I'll make it, where is it? 0.15 will be fine. And where roughness is higher on our right side of ramp, okay, first of all, I will rename our ramp to ramp 2. And this color should be darker. First, I will make it black just to showcase. Actually, black will work, but yeah, I'll just pipe it into the base color and you will see what we got. Give it a second to evaluate, and here we go. It's a bit darker than I actually expected. So the initial color, I think, let's make it, oh, my bad. Yeah, initial color was too dark. So whenever roughness is higher, the color becomes darker. I'll just drag the handle to the left to increase the contrast, so you can see better what's happening. Okay, this contrast is a bit too much in my opinion, so I'll drag it a bit to the right. But you already can see, right, that the darker parts, they are more rough and they are darker. Let's give it a minute to evaluate a bit more. Okay, so we now have sort of a setup of stained material. Again, we can get the normal, display select normal. We can get the same results of this occlusion mask because it generates the information we actually kind of interested in. Oops, I had a hair normal. Let's say D, no, normal. So if you press the D, hit the D, then NO, it takes the first letter of the displays and the first 2 letters from the normal. So just writing down 3 letters will work just fine. Okay, scale 1 is too much. Let's start with our 1. Pipe the occlusion into our amount. And finally, we get the displaced normals into base normals. Let's see what we got. I'll disable the preview. I think I have overdone it because maybe occlusion generates values that are a bit too low. Again, I'll just increase the scale by 5 times by writing down 0.5, and let's see what we get now. Did I connect everything? Yeah, it should be working. I'm not exactly seeing the results I want. Well, no, actually, yeah, I now start to see it. As you can see here, the normals definitely start to pop out. Maybe let's make it 0.2 to see it better. I don't want it to overdo it. Okay, definitely we are having the result. Right, this looks a bit too much, but obviously it's working. Okay, so I'll divide it by, let's say 4, make it negative. Let's see how that works. Okay. So we have our worn down metal just by piping the occlusion mask and the triplanar project. What was it? The bias. We triplanar projected the bias into our occlusion and driven a couple of ramps to get this worn metal, which actually looks pretty good, in my opinion, of course. Opinion may vary. Anyway, I think the effect is pretty good. Okay, now to dirt mask. With the dirt mask, we can create, well, as the name suggests, let's say dirt licks. Okay, so I will hold down the Alt key of our principal shader. It becomes principal shader 2. So basically, it will be another setup. Okay, the dirt mask, we're gonna create another ramp parameter. I'll just type the ramp P and it makes ramp parameter automatically. I rename that to ramp 3. And the dirt mask, first of all, as you can see, the black will be kind of polished, and whatever makes it more white will become rough. But that's not all. We will also change the color. So actually, let's start with changing the color. Let's say dirt's color. Everything that was black will be dark gray, and everything that was that is to become white, let's make it the color of dirt-ish. Okay, this looks like a sort of like dirt. I think it's okay. Okay, so I connect the dirt mask to the input of the ramp 3, which is our dirt color. Then I connect this to base color. Now, first of all, let's see, metallic, roughness. Yeah, this works okay. So first of all, I drag and drop our principal shader to a different one. As we can see, again, everything is super fresh. No tear and wear, nothing. Just right from the factory. Now I connect the dirt color and I connect it to the base color. Let's see what we got. Dirt max samples 19. Okay, should be good. So what do we got? What do we got? Let's see. First of all, I'll make the roughness very high to showcase better how it looks. And I'll remove the metallic because now we don't see really the difference between the colors. I make the color, let's say, super extremely red, just to see what we are getting from our ramp. Okay, finally we are getting the result. The dirt is being accumulated under the overhangs of the geometry. So if the geometry from the top protects the bottom to get clean from the dirt, it will show up. Now, I don't like the repetition too much of our dirt mask, so I decrease the scale to remove the repetition. I mean, to make the repetition appear less, so it doesn't look like it looked previously. So, yep, exactly. It removed the repetition slightly, but it looks much better in my mind already. Okay, let's get back to our ramp. The ramp, the color, I forgot what color it was, but let's assume it was kind of like this. Okay. Let's make it maybe darker. I think dirt should be slightly lighter and desaturated. Sort of like this. Okay. Okay, finally we have the difference showing up. As you can see, it's not super obvious, but we can see here dirt is showing up, here dirt is showing up. So it's subtle effect, but it's okay. Why is it okay? Because now we are gonna tweak the roughness, which will make anything that becomes our dirt color rough, and everything that was metal will stay not exactly rough. So 0.2 should be good, and roughness of 1 should be good as well. So it will become extremely rough, where this color will show up. For now, our roughness is like 1. Let's make it 0.2. Okay, we start seeing more reflections. I'll give it a second to compute just so we can see the difference when I hit the snap button. All right, beautiful. I hit the snap button and I connect our ramp to the roughness. And we should start seeing the difference. Where it was yellowish color, it should be very rough. And where it was not yellowish, it should be with roughness of 0.3. 0.3. 0.2. So it will have more reflections. Yeah, the effect starts to be a bit more pronounced. As you can see, the difference in reflectivity is, well, in this case, really obvious. Let's compare. And indeed, we have the difference in reflectivity. Now, it looks like a plastic because we removed our metallic. Now I'll make metallic 1. As we'll see in a minute, the difference becomes more drastic. Okay, finally, I will hold down. Okay, I forgot to rename the ramp to ramp 4. Now it will become more obvious. My bad. As you can see here, it does not reflect virtually any light. Where we have sort of like the dirt, it does not reflect almost nothing. Honestly, I think this color is a bit too dark, so I'll make it like 0.1, I think should be good. And this dirt color could be slightly lighter, just to give it more contrast. It's not mandatory to increase these numbers, but yeah, just so it shows up a little bit better because it was a bit too dark. Okay, our dirt started showing up. Now I think we can increase the amount of dirt. Again, I dragged and dropped the dirt mask to our render preview. Let's see, maybe divide it by 25. 25, no, maybe 35, just to give the dirt a little bit more place to show up. Drag and drop principal shader back, and we should see a little bit more dirt on our geometry. Okay, this is perfect. Finally, I want to indicate where our metallic will be and where our metallic will not be. So basically, dirt, as you might have already concluded yourself, is not a metallic thing. So the metallic where the dirt shows up should be 0. And when it doesn't show up, where the actual stock, which is clean, should show up, it should be metallic, so it should be 1. Okay, let's see. So our dirt is on the right, so inverse logic, right? Where the dirt is, the metallicness should be 0. I'll make this color 0. And where the dirt is not, it should be 1. So it should be fully metallic. Let's connect our ramp number 5 to metallic. And let's call it metalness. What else did we not rename? This is roughness. Let's give it a couple of seconds to evaluate the shader, and it should be good to go. Did I mess up something again? Probably not. I'll just restart the render. Sometimes it doesn't pick up the new things. Partially the problem actually is because my geometry is super dense. It's like a couple of millions of polygons, so it takes a little bit more time to compute and build the scene, so I apologize for this inconvenience. All right. The difference becomes more obvious where the dirt shows up. Now what I want to do is actually tweak the roughness because 0.2 is a bit not enough. Let's make it 0.28 something. Because this part of our weapon looks a bit too polished. I don't believe this is essentially the case with the machined metal. For the guns, it usually is 0.28, 0.33, 34, so roughness somewhere around there. Okay, we can increase the contrast, but we first should see where our dirt shows up, essentially to make the contrast a bit more. Let's see. Okay, if I now move this slider to the right, the contrast should improve, and whenever we have this yellowish color, it should not be metallic at all. Okay, this is perfect. I'll give it a second to compute. All right. Finally, I think what we can do is, first of all, I'll create a null, and you will see in a second why I'm doing this, and I connect this dirt to the null, and then I connect all of our inputs. Oops, all of our inputs. Why doesn't it let me do this? To our dirt. Okay, finally, fix that. Now, why I'm doing this is because if we want to create a different version of our mask and we want to compare everything quickly, like I'm creating the copy, and then I tweak some parameters, let's say, I don't know, let's say divided by 15 or something, right? Then we get this to max distance. Let's make bias -3, change the direction. Now I don't have to reconnect everything here. I just get this dirt mask into our null, and it will now compute different result of different mask. So it's easier. Okay, I'll have to restart the render. It's easier to change up the inputs for our rounds. Okay, finally, we create displays by normal. So again, I press D and O, displays along normal. Okay, this is much more dirtier, so to speak. This dirt mask, I will divide. No, I think we'll just control it with this scale. Scale like 0.01 should be good to start. We connect the displace N to base N, as in displace normals to base normals of our shader, and we should start seeing our dirt popping out of our metal. And this is exactly what is happening. Now I think that the roughness contrast should be emulating the contrast of our metalness. So I'm just going to drag our sliders to kind of replicate what we had in the metalness, because otherwise it will take a little bit more information that I need for reflecting in the normals. And the effect is a bit too much, but it's obvious. We know, as per usual, that it's working, which is great. So I divided by 3 by typing 003. Let's see what we will have. All right, the effect is a bit more subtle, but I welcome the change. In fact, it's a bit too subtle. Let's make it 0.05. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about is combining these two generators that we have already built. Get this dirt mask to here. Connect the mount to our null as well. Okay, everything is set up and working properly. Finally, we have this dirt mask, we have this occlusion mask, and you're thinking, what if we could get this dirt mask and combine it somehow with occlusion mask, which looks like this, And can we add one mask to another, or maybe combine it in any other way? And indeed we can, just because it's a data of our pixel render time generated information, we can just press add, and this time we will just have add, and we can add result of this dirt mask. Let's make it dirt mask, just to not confuse ourselves with the nulls. Result of this dirt mask and the result of this occlusion mask. Again, dirt mask, occlusion mask. If I drag it into our add, and if the result of the sum of the shaders will get it into our principled, what's happening? Into our principled shader. So again, to reiterate what's happening, I am adding the occlusion mask to the dirt mask, and this result will drive our shader. Well, something became very broken right now. Yeah. Somehow I messed up. I'm sorry, something messed up. I'm not sure what's happening, but a couple of connections got disconnected essentially. All right, back to the business. So our result of addition of our mask will generate, as the name suggests, the added masks. So we now are using what we have built with our occlusion mask, what we have built with the dirt mask. As we can see here, everything is getting controlled by one triplanar projection. Of course, occlusion is being controlled by divided by -1 bias. Dirt mask is being controlled by divided maximum distance. But anyway, the point is, we have combined these two masks using the add node, and this add node goes into the null just for the purposes of easier connection to our principal shader. And this now controls our shader that is building our overall look of the weapon. Now, as we can see, I think the displacement, again, it pipes here. It looks a bit too in the nose, if you will. So the scale, I suppose we can divide it by 2.5 times by pressing the scale of 0.002. And let's just see what's the result. How it looks. Should be a bit more subtle. 0.001 possibly will make it even better. Again, I'm usually personally preferring the subtle approach because the in-your-face approach doesn't really work for me that much. Not a big fan of stylized effects on especially on the hard surfaces, because stylized hard surfaces, maybe works well for stuff like Overwatch and I don't know. But for this, it's not working for me. Just a personal preference. You, of course, you can make the scale as large as you want. This is not mandatory. Okay, finally, our weapon shows up, and as we can see, yep, it obviously has been in the use. It's not a pristine new, just off the shelf from the factory created, and we can see that someone indeed has been hopefully bringing peace to the world using this SMG. Okay, final thing. It takes a little bit more time than I expected to evaluate. Again, it's because this particular weapon has like a couple of million polygons to represent the whole cat data. And if you have an easier geometry to evaluate, it will obviously become faster. Again, if you have a super monster CPU, like with 30 cores or more cores, I, in my case, have just 16, rendering with 15. If you have like 100 cores, obviously it will be 5 times faster, so not a problem. Sadly, Mantra is not being sped up by GPU, but Karma is supposed to be getting the beta of GPU next year, so we will see how that goes. Anyway, our weapon is almost ready, and the results are looking pretty good, don't you think? Okay, so this was the dirt mask, occlusion mask. We controlled it with triplanar projection. We made some simple math operations to control the outputs of our mask, and we created a number of ramps and a displacement to control the overall look of our weapon. All right. This was maybe a bit too much information, and take one step at a time. You know, control one ramp to control the color, another ramp to control the roughness, maybe the third to control the metalness, and on top, after everything, just like we did before, add the displacement. Because everything at once, I know it can be intimidating, but it comes with practice. So, and if you're thinking, I'm actually not sure how much time has been, let's say we have been making it for 25 minutes or something. And you're thinking, well, 25 minutes is a bit too much, right? It just takes too much time to look dev. Essentially, if I were not to explain everything step by step, it would take me anywhere from 5 to 15 times faster, because I know my way around the node editor. I know my way around, again, around the math operations and all the biases and whatnot. So it actually it takes a fraction of time. For the learning purposes, of course, I explain everything, go very elaborate on the nulls and ramps. It takes more time, but don't be afraid. If you just, practice this for a couple of weeks, I don't know, I assure you, you will do it twice or 3 times as fast as we have just been doing it right now. And maybe after a month or two, you'll be like 5 times faster. So it will take no time to build shaders like that. Anyway, hopefully this was useful. If you did find this useful, don't forget to hit the like button. If you don't want to miss anything else, press the subscribe button. If you have ideas and suggestions, don't forget to use the comment section below. I'll try to read everything, respond if needed, and yeah, hit the render button and see you later.